Population is a group of organisms from the same species. And so they are distributed in either a uniform manner, a random manner, or a clumped manner. And so when you're considering populations, you should look at survivorship curves and also logistic growth curves. And so survivorship curves consists of three types, type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1 is for case-selected species, type 2 is for constant mortality rate, and type 3 is for R-selected species. And for growth curves, populations usually go according to a logistic way, exponential in the beginning and slowing down until they reach carrying capacity. For communities, a community is a group of populations of multiple species, and so these species interact most commonly through competition. So interspecific competition is when two species compete over the same resource. According to the competitive exclusive principle, these two species cannot coexist. And so two solutions are resource partitioning, in which either the resource is used differently by one species or their niches change, and also character displacement, in which two very similar species go through evolutionary divergence, in which their differences are accentuated so they can coexist. Also for communities, it's important to look at biodiversity. So high biodiversity aids in resistance against environmental stressors as well as invasive species. And biodiversity is measured by species richness as well as species evenness. It's also important to consider energy and matter. As regard to energy, gross primary productivity is the total amount of energy converted to organic molecules, while net primary productivity is the remaining amount of energy that can be transferred to another organism after respiration by producers. According to the 10% rule, only 10% of the energy from one trophic level is transferred to the next trophic level. And lastly, the two laws of thermodynamics is the first law is energy is neither created nor destroyed, and the second one is that entropy usually always increases in a system.
In the spectrum of ecosystem ecology, it is important to consider the multitude of biomes as well as the biogeochemical cycles that make life possible. The four main biogeochemical cycles are carbon, phosphorus, water, and the nitrogen cycle. The phosphorus cycle is not a global cycle because it does not involve the atmosphere. Phosphorus is usually released through ions from the weathering of rocks and then absorbed by plants. The nitrogen cycle is a complex cycle that involves plants, animals, decomposers, and even bacteria. The water cycle is also quite important as it recycles one of the most abundant resources on the earth. Biomes are another important element in ecosystem ecology. There are many of them, and they are characterized by similar climate conditions and specific wildlife. Now on to animal behaviors. A behavior is basically a response to an external stimuli. Behaviors are categorized into two broad categories, innate and learned. Behaviors are essentially a response to any external stimuli. Innate behaviors are instinctive and automatic, whereas learned behaviors develop during a lifetime and are developed through experiences. However, the ability to learn is inherited. Fixed action behaviors are signaled by assigned stimulus, and they are unchangeable once they start and are always conducted to completion. Imprinting occurs during a specific critical period which varies from organism to organism, where they learn how to form social attachments. In innate movement, there is taxis and kinesis. Taxis is an automatic change in direction, either away or toward, as a result of a stimulus. Kinesis is a change in the rate of movement in response to a stimulus. The two types of learned behavior, there's associative learning, which is composed of operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Operant conditioning associates a reward or consequences with the behavior, whereas classical conditioning associates a neutral stimulus with a significant stimulus. There are numerous social behaviors that occur within animals, such as communication, which is either sound, language, or the use of pheromones, agonistic behaviors, dominance hierarchy, cooperation, and altruistic behavior, which includes kin selection.